It's a cottage industry, right? I mean, the practitioners and the makers are the same people.
Yeah.
And so exactly. there is no production to consumption, transition with its proper channels and its separation of those roles. There are many industries in which if you are a producer, you are not a consumer because you're getting everybody else's stuff for free. You're getting all the promotions. You're an insider, and that's not the case.
It's also a battle in representations. I can tell you how many times I had very toxic or non-productive discussions with people that had completely internalized this division between
it's huge.
Players and after reflecting on that debate after that, I understood that for me it was so obvious, so self-evident that I put a bit of pride in publishing games, but it's not something in which I would create a kind of distance with people. I never, and this was much more in the representation or visions of people I was debating with than in how I felt about it.
There's some fascinating history here, which I think you probably already know and appreciate. Excuse me. Which is that when venture capital entered role-playing in the late 1980s, particularly for TSR, then all the other little companies wanted it too. So they all sought venture capital, and a lot of the early 90s games were based on that. Now, venture capital and return on investment and role-playing don't really go together very well. And so that was a very hot affair for about 5 years, but it ended with just a huge mess, a very messy and unhygienic hotel room, and that's where the affair ends. And so I am saying that during that period, the separation between producer and consumption was inflated in the hobby as an image. And that's and I was I am enough of a cynic not to have been taken in the first place. Also, coming in the hobby in the beginning, when I knew that every publisher was just another dude, with a Society for Creative Anachronism sword on his wall, just another guy. I mean, this is something that I keep having to tell OSR people, that to us, the actual, original role players, we knew Gary Gygax was just another dude in some Midwestern town. He wasn't bringing us fantasy. We were already embedded in it as much as him. So big deal, right? In that sense. And so but coming into gaming later, there was much more of a picture. I mean, anybody you talk to in the company always used the plural we, or even the special promotional we here at so-and-so publishing.
Okay.
Right, and that was the subject of the sentence. Well, we here at Dogmatic Games, we think, and so, and then you'd call somebody. This was when I started publishing, and somebody would say, "Yeah, give me a call. I can turn you on to some artists." And I was like, "Great." I'd give a call. I'd get their answering machine, and it would say, "We're away from our desks right now," and I'd be like, first of all, who's we? You and your tapeworm, and then second, your desk is like is your 1970s wall phone next to your ironing board. Don't tell me your desk. So and I still, I mean, people were shocked when I was blunt about this, and I said, TSR was probably was just a telephone, his mom's telephone, and that White Wolf is a dorm room.
Sure.
And people would say, but the offices of White Wolf. You say, what offices? You think they actually have an office like downtown? Give me a fucking break. They're just geeks like you.
Yeah.
And anybody can get a business card. And so so first of all, there was that element that kind of created the glossy production of the time. And I will say, if you don't mind me being a little critical, the European hobby community was, I think, wrongly given the impression that role-playing was a high production affair. So the proper, I even pull out specifically the French games to criticize this and say, why on earth is this published in something that looks like, you should be publishing in something like this 100 years after you're dead. That's the only time that your game should be published in an edition looking like this. And the idea that that's normal. You should be paying €100 for a role-playing game that you buy off the shelf. Like, what the fuck? And so
I call that a fetish of the object.
But that's exactly what it is. But the point being that in the U.S., at least, we had seen the games grow into that form very artificially. And with that, most of us who had started in role playing knew exactly what they were. Actually, that even inside that great big hardback, one of these street corner pamphlets is actually what's inside those covers.
Yeah.
And so that's another aspect. But to the legitimacy thing is a problem. A great deal of promoting the kind of sense of legitimacy is also in modern society separating production and consumption. Right? If you say to people, I publish role-playing games, and they say, what does that mean? I have taken to saying it doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean that producers are making a lot of money and able to fund their efforts out of the fandom of a bunch of consumers. This is a cottage industry.
Yeah.
And that's why I always mocked the use of the word "the industry," right? Because they wanted it to be. Now, the trouble is that the same debate has occurred for decades in two places that are very obvious: movies and comics. And is anybody with a camera a filmmaker?
Okay.
Is anybody with a pen and a paper a comics creator? And then you say, well, if you want to go by product, and you say, or result, and you say, well, yeah, this dude, I've watched it. It's a movie. By any standards, that's a movie. And by the way, some of your high production stuff from all your buddies over in Hollywood, no, that's not a movie. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you look at this guy's comic, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's a comic. And maybe, maybe it's not even brilliant. Maybe it's just a comic.
Okay.
It is one. And you can like it or not like it. You can say that its skill is high or low, but it's a comic. And someone would say, well, no, it's not a comic unless it is in the acknowledged production and consumption stream.
Exactly.
And that's just vanity publishing.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, that's kind of interesting, because how is the latest Stephen King not vanity publishing? No, I'm not going to apologize for that. A good 80% of Stephen King's work is trash. And not good trash either, just trash. Shouldn't even.
Which is something he acknowledged himself.
Of course, yeah. Which is credit to him, but there are people who don't acknowledge it, for which it's true as well. So, don't, talk to me about a legitimizing aspect of being part of that production stream, because all that means is that some asshole who doesn't do anything is making money off it.
Yeah.
So you can see the radicalism.
Yeah.
Back there in my background. You try growing up in the United States and talking like this. See what happens to you. Taking this kind of language, to role playing, and I found it. I can at least see why people say this about movies and music and comics. I can at least see that. With music, there's always been a fight. The fight has always been very visible in music. And then in comics, the fight has been visible, invisible, visible, invisible. And then in movies, it's been kind of I call it the Cuba in the United States approach. You can't be in, you can't be in, you're not legitimate, you can't be in, you can't be in. Oh, wait, you're in? Oh, brother! And so it's like nuclear weapons, same thing. You can't have them, you can't have them, you can't have them, you can't. Oh, you have one? All right, I guess you're a member of the club,
Yeah.
And so...
very important gatekeeping, yeah.
Right. And so, but the point is that the gatekeeping is unsuccessful, so they have to rewind their attitude the second it changes. So, that's what happens in movies. And, yesterday's, illegitimate little snot who we're all supposed to hate suddenly is one of our beloved, geniuses. And so then you end up with, in role-playing, though, you have no excuse even to have that attitude in the first place. In those industries, at least you have an excuse because there are people who are dedicated to keeping it like that.
Yeah.
But in role-playing, there's no excuse to have that attitude. It's simply not true. I used to say, Dungeons and Dragons was TSR was $37 million in debt in 1994 or so.
Okay.
And in the dollars of that time, that's a significant amount of money. And, $37 million. Right? Well, anyway, at the time that's failure. That's a failure state. And, and nobody knew it. I would go to the conventions, 5 years after that, I was in conventions doing the independent thing. And they would say, well, you're not legitimate like D&D. And I say, what, that piece of vanity press? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, look, if something can continue to be a marketable product after being $37 million in debt, it's a vanity project. Period. And so how am I a vanity project and them not? So, but you see, I hated that discussion because I was still legitimizing through money, which I didn't really want to do. But I had to break the chain. I had to break the foundation somehow. And the first thing you do is to tell them and show them that what they're saying is just not true, even in their own terms.
What's also kind of specific, I think, from small niche markets such as ours, is that there's always a status game. You can't not have
humans do this, and we are not alone in doing this. It is
we worked a lot for against exactly the kind of gatekeeping. So for instance, there is a website in which they still distinguish between professional and amateurs. So and we will not acknowledge that amateurs is derogatory. So
right.
I've tried to explain it, to fight it, to debate a lot, and it's never.
Well, there's an investment. I mean, if you can call certain things professional and you yourself fit into that, then it's part of your brand and it's part of your, it's part of your sense of success.
We were also very vigilant of critics who would say that we created another kind of gatekeeping.
Well, I've been accused of that many times myself, but much of it inaccurate. So go on, yeah.
But because the thing is, Romaric Briand, so who was quite central is a philosopher. Sorry.
No.
And many of us were PhD students or artists or academics, what have you. So
I can think of a few derogatory terms for the collective, but go on. Yes.
Yeah. But and we were at least in intellectuals, and we wanted to as I said in the beginning, we wanted to show that thinking was not something dirty.
Right.
And we were accused a lot of gatekeeping on this matter. So we were a lot of accused of being a kind of intellectual, elite.
Right.
Which in a way,
it's fascinating to be told first of all that you're an amateur and down there in the dirt and of no worth because you are just down there in the dirt, and then simultaneously you're an elite.
Yeah. kind of it's kind of a bohem kind of vision, stereotypical vision of who we might be, which we never were.
Right.
I mean,
right.